We don't sit still for long. It seems to be part of who we are. We move houses. We change cities, we cross oceans, we even look at other planets and wonder what it would be like to live there. This restlessness feels modern, like a product of cars and planes and the internet. But it's not. It's one of the oldest things about us. Like, the story of humanity is the story of a journey. A long, slow walk out of one corner of Africa to every corner of the earth. So, what was the engine behind it all? Why didn't our ancestors just find a nice spot and stay there? It wasn't one single reason, it was a cascade of reasons, one bleeding into the next over millions of years. It was a mix of push and pull. The world pushed us out, and our own nature pulled us forward. To understand it, you have to go back to the very beginning when we weren't even human yet. It all started with the weather. Our story begins in Africa. Millions of years ago, much of East Africa was covered in lush, dense forests. For our distant, ape-like ancestors, this was paradise. The trees were everything. They were a source of food, like fruit and leaves. They were a safe place to sleep, high above the predators that prowled the ground at night. Life was predictable. You lived in your patch of forest, you knew where the good fruit trees were, and you didn't have much reason to leave. Your world was vertical, up and down the trees. But then the world started to change. Tectonic plates shifted, mountains rose up. These changes altered weather patterns. The reliable rains became less reliable. The climate grew cooler and drier. And the great African forests began to shrink. They broke apart into smaller patches, separated by a new kind of landscape. The savanna, open grassland with a few scattered trees. For a creature built for the forest, this was a disaster. It was like the grocery store suddenly moved miles away, and the road to get there was full of lions. The food was no longer a short climb away. It was spread out. A clump of fruit trees here, a patch of edible roots there, maybe miles apart. Staying in one place was no longer an option. Staying in one place meant starving. So, our ancestors were forced to move. They had to come down from the trees and start crossing those open grasslands to get from one patch of forest to another. This was the first great push. It wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Move or die. This new reality changed everything about us. It literally reshaped our bodies. Walking on all fours in the trees is fine, but it's not very efficient for crossing long distances on the ground. The individuals who could stand up and walk on two legs, even for short distances, had an advantage. They could see over the tall grass, spotting predators or distant food sources. They used less energy to travel, which was critical when calories were scarce. And walking on two legs freed up their hands. This move to bipedalism was a huge evolutionary step. It was a direct response to the need to travel. We became walkers because the world forced us to. Our body started to specialize in movement. We developed long legs, arched feet that act like springs, and a big butt muscle, the gluteus maximus, to power our stride. We weren't the fastest animals on the savannah. Not even close. But we were becoming the best long-distance walkers the world had ever seen. The environment pushed, and our bodies responded. We were now creatures of the trail, not the canopy. And this was just the beginning. The need for food would continue to drive us, but now we had the body to do something about it. The new landscape didn't just have plants, it had animals, big herds of them. And as our ancestors spent more time on the ground, they started to see these animals not just as a threat, but as a potential meal. Meat is a very different kind of food from fruit. It's incredibly dense in calories and fat. For a creature that was now burning a lot of energy walking around, meat was a superfood. But getting it was hard. Our early ancestors weren't strong hunters. They probably started as scavengers. They'd follow lions or hyenas and wait for them to finish a kill, then rush in to grab the scraps. To do this, you need to be smart. You need to understand other animals' behavior. And you need tools. This is where our newly freed hands came in handy. We started picking up rocks. Not just any rocks, but rocks we could use to hammer open bones to get at the rich marrow inside. Or sharp-edged flakes of stone to slice meat off a carcass. This was a technological revolution. A simple stone tool doesn't seem like much, but it was a game changer. It allowed us to access a huge new source of calories that was completely unavailable to us before. This created a powerful feedback loop. Getting meat and marrow required a bigger brain. You had to be able to plan, to cooperate, to make a decent tool. But meat and marrow provided the exact kind of high-quality fuel a bigger brain needs to grow. So the more meat we ate, the bigger our brains got, and the bigger our brains got, the better we became at getting meat. Our diet changed, our brains grew, and our technology improved. We went from scavengers to hunters. We learned to track animals. We learned to work together to bring down prey much larger than ourselves. And these animals didn't stay in one place. Herds of wildebeest, gazelle, and buffalo followed the rains and the green grass. So to eat, we had to follow them. Our movements were no longer just about getting from one patch of trees to the next. We were now following the herds. Our range expanded dramatically. We were becoming nomadic hunters, our lives tied to the great migrations of the animals. We were still being pushed by the need for food, but we were becoming more active and strategic about it. Our growing intelligence gave us options. We weren't just reacting to a changing world, we were starting to master it. This combination of an efficient walking body, a calorie-hungry brain, and a simple but effective toolkit made us a formidable new kind of creature. We were adaptable. We could survive in different environments, and this adaptability would soon take us on the greatest journey of all out of Africa. For millions of years, the story of our evolution was confined to one continent. But by about 2 million years ago, a new chapter began. Groups of our ancestors, creatures we now call Homo erectus, started to walk out of Africa. This wasn't a single planned expedition with a map and a destination. It was a slow generational trickle. Imagine a small group of hunters and gatherers living in a valley. They're successful. Their population grows. The valley, which once had plenty of food for everyone, starts to feel a little crowded. The hunting gets harder. The best plants are picked over. So a few of the younger, more adventurous individuals decide to see what's over the next ridge. They walk for a day or two and find a new valley. It's empty, full of animals that have never seen a two-legged hunter before. It's a paradise, so they stay. Decades later, the same thing happens in their new valley. It gets a little crowded, and a new generation looks to the next ridge. Repeat this process over thousands and thousands of years. A few miles every generation. It doesn't seem like much, but it adds up. A slow, relentless wave of expansion. This is probably how we first left Africa. It wasn't a grand march, but a gradual spread driven by a very simple motive: finding a new place with enough food and less competition. Population pressure was the push from behind. The climate helped too. The world was going through ice ages. When vast amounts of water were locked up in glaciers, sea levels were lower. The land that is now underwater was dry. At times, the Sahara Desert wasn't a desert at all. It was a green, lush savanna with lakes and rivers, creating a corridor for animals and the people who hunted them to walk right out of Africa and into the Middle East. Sometimes these green periods, these pumps, would last for thousands of years, allowing populations to move out. Then the climate would shift again, the desert would return, and those populations would be cut off, free to spread into Asia and Europe. So, our ancestors walked, they followed the coastlines which were rich with seafood, they followed rivers into the interior of continents, they followed the great herds of mammoth, bison, and horse across the plains of Eurasia. They were incredibly successful. Homo erectus fossils have been found as far away as China and Indonesia. They were the first true global wanderers. They were able to do this because they carried their survival kit with them, not in a backpack, but in their minds and their hands. They knew how to make stone tools. They probably knew how to control fire, which was another massive advantage. Fire provides warmth, allowing you to survive in colder climates. It cooks food, making it easier to digest and unlocking more nutrients. It keeps predators away at night, and it becomes a social hub, a place to gather, share food, and communicate. This ability to adapt was our superpower. We didn't have thick fur, so we learned to use fire and probably animal skins to stay warm. We didn't have sharp claws, so we made sharp stones. For every problem a new environment threw at us, our growing brains found a solution. We weren't just moving to survive anymore, we were moving into new worlds and thriving. But we weren't alone. As we spread, other kinds of humans evolved in different parts of the world. The Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, the Denisovans in Eastern Asia. They were our cousins, also descended from the early humans who left Africa. They were smart, capable survivors, perfectly adapted to their own environments. Then, a new wave came. Our own species, Homo sapiens. We emerged in Africa around 300,000 years ago. And for a long time, we stayed there. But sometime around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, we began our own great expansion out of Africa. And this time, it was different. We went everywhere. We reached Australia by boat. We pushed north into the frozen tundra of Siberia, and finally we crossed the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas, spreading all the way to the tip of South America. We populated every continent except Antarctica. What made our expansion so total? What was different about us? The answer seems to lie inside our skulls. We had a new kind of mind. We could think in symbols. We developed complex language, allowing us to share detailed information, make intricate plans, and build stronger social bonds. We created art painting stunning images of animals on cave walls. We made music. We created elaborate jewelry and buried our dead with ceremony. This cognitive revolution gave us a huge edge. Our social networks became larger and more complex. We could cooperate in bigger groups. We could trade information and resources over long distances. My cousin's group, who lives 3 valleys over, saw a big herd of bison moving east. We should head that way. This level of planning and cooperation made us incredibly effective. Our technology also took a leap forward. We weren't just making simple hand axes anymore, we created a whole new toolkit. We invented the spear thrower, or atlatl, which let us hurl a spear with much more force and accuracy. We made tiny, sharp stone blades that could be fitted into a variety of handles. We invented the needle, which allowed us to sew together tailored clothing from animal hides, creating a personal microclimate that let us survive the brutal cold of the Ice Age. We were the ultimate adapters. If the Neanderthals were the cold weather specialists, we were the generalists who brought our own central heating. When we arrived in lands already occupied by our human cousins, we seemed to have outcompeted them. We were probably better at getting food, and we likely had higher birth rates. Within a few thousand years of our arrival, the other human species were gone. We were the last humans standing, so we have the push of climate change, the search for food, the pressure of a growing population, and the pull of new technology and a new way of thinking. But there might be another piece to the puzzle. Something less tangible. Something deep in our psychology. Is it possible we moved simply because we were curious? Everything we've talked about so far has been about need. The need for food, the need for safety, the need for new resources. These are powerful, practical motivators. But they might not be the whole story. Humans have a powerful sense of curiosity. We want to know what's on the other side of the mountain. We want to see what's down that river. This trait, this desire to explore, could have been an evolutionary advantage. In a world that was constantly changing, the groups that stayed put in their comfortable valley might have done well for a while. But when a drought came or a new disease swept through, they were vulnerable. The groups that had a streak of wanderlust, the ones who were always sending out scouts to see what was out there, were more likely to have a plan B. They knew where the next water source was. They knew about the other valley where the hunting was good. Curiosity could have been a form of survival insurance. Maybe this is why we didn't just stop when we reached a nice beach with plenty of fish. We built boats and sailed out into the open ocean, not knowing what, if anything, we would find. The peopling of the Pacific Islands is a testament to this incredible drive. People got into outrigger canoes and sailed into the unknown, navigating by stars and currents, searching for tiny specks of land they weren't even sure existed. This is more than just a search for food. This is exploration for its own sake. There's a social element to this too. Moving wasn't a solo activity, it was done in groups, in families, and bands. And social dynamics themselves can be a powerful reason to move. A group is a complex thing. There are friendships and rivalries, there are arguments over resources or mates. Sometimes the best solution to a conflict within the group isn't a fight, it's to leave. A family or a faction might decide they are better off on their own, and they pack up and move on. This fission-fusion dynamic, where groups split apart and sometimes rejoin later, is common in hunter-gatherer societies. Every time a group splits, one part of it is moving into a new territory. Social friction can be as powerful a driver as an empty stomach. We moved because we were social animals, we needed each other to hunt, to raise children, and to defend ourselves. But being social also creates tension, and sometimes the easiest way to release that tension is to put some distance between you and the problem. So, let's try to pull all these threads together. What drove our ancestors to keep moving? It started with a push. The climate changed, our forest home shrank, and we were forced onto the savanna to find food. This changed our bodies, making us expert walkers. Then came the pull of a new diet. Meat was a rich source of energy that fueled a bigger brain. To get that meat, we had to follow the herds. This turned us into nomads. A bigger brain led to better technology. Tools and fire allowed us to solve the problems of new environments, to live in places we were not biologically designed for. We became the ultimate adapters. Success led to more people, and more people led to pressure. When a place got too crowded, some of us moved on, always looking for a new frontier with less competition. The slow, steady expansion took us out of Africa and across the world. Our own species, Homo sapiens, brought a new mind to the game. With complex language, symbolic thought, and superior technology, we could cooperate and adapt better than anyone before us. We outcompeted our human cousins and populated the entire planet, and woven through it all was a thread of something more human. Curiosity, a desire to see what's over the hill. Social dynamics, the arguments and alliances that make us who we are, sometimes pushed groups apart and into new lands. It was never just one thing, it was a messy, complex, and powerful combination of forces. The environment pushed us, our hunger pulled us, our brains enabled us, our social lives complicated things, and our innate curiosity lured us over the horizon. This long journey has shaped us. The challenges our ancestors faced on their migrations selected for certain traits. Adaptability, cooperation, problem solving, a willingness to take risks. These are the things that got our species through ice ages and across oceans. That ancient restlessness is still inside us. We may live in cities of millions and buy our food from a store, but the impulse that drove our ancestors across the savanna is not gone. It's in the scientist exploring the deep sea. It's in the entrepreneur starting a new company. It's in the family that packs up a moving van for a new life in a different state. It's in the quiet, persistent question we all sometimes ask ourselves, what's next? We are the children of the people who didn't stay put. We are the descendants of the ones who were brave enough, or desperate enough, or just curious enough to take that first step into the unknown. The long walk of our ancestors isn't just a story from the past, it's the reason we are who we are today.